And I loved it. I loved every aspect of it.
Mhm.
And being the only female and being able to go to schools and show, young girls that it's possible, girls can be firefighters too, was amazing. That was a huge highlight of my career, was watching, their little eyes light up and seeing me driving a fire truck. And I would get messages from moms and stuff all the time saying, "Oh, my daughter's seeing you driving the fire truck." And she said, "Mom, there's a girl." So she said, just showing, my daughter that she could do it too. And it is the coolest job in the world. Then it's a huge eye opener in realizing who benefited from you not having any boundaries. And that's the only reason why they were in your life. And when I started removing and not allowing that toxicity anymore, I was worried at first. It's like, well, I had a small circle. Now I have a really small circle.
Good morning.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm good.
I'm just so glad that you're here with me for this conversation today. I've been following your work on Instagram for a while, and I just think what you're doing is so important. I'm so excited for your book that's about to be launched.
Only a couple more days.
It's such a wild process, hey?
It's literally wild. That is the only way to describe it. And I followed your lead and I let you do it first and, just kind of watched from the sidelines. And it is a wild experience. It's terrifying, but it's extremely exciting at the same time.
Totally. How did you find the book writing process for you?
To begin with, it just flowed. Like I laugh and say that it was rage writing to start because it came out faster than I could type. It was just flowing and flowing. I had no idea what direction it was going. I had no idea what was going to happen with it. I just let it come out to start with. And then it started to kind of piece together. There was a lot of emotions. I say it's therapy times 100. One thing that I did run into quite often was I kept finding that I would almost feel like I needed more. I would be spewing all of this stuff into a computer screen, and it was like telling your best friend your deepest, darkest secrets and getting absolutely nothing back. No feedback, just a blank face looking at you. And I realized it was because I'm putting it all into the computer and not like I'm so used to therapy and hypnosis and, all of the counseling and where you get feedback. And when you're writing, there is no feedback coming back at you. So you are just bearing your soul, being extremely vulnerable, and then there's nothing.
Yeah, right.
And so it took me a little bit to understand what was happening because I felt like I was writing and then I would feel so horrible after, like I would feel drained, like I had no closure, like there was something missing. And then all of a sudden one day it was like, oh, because you're literally giving it all to a computer screen and not a person. Like there's no feeling coming back at you. There's no emotion. There's nothing. It just was just happening. And so that I think was the biggest struggle for me in the process until I understood what was happening. And then, but it just was the safest space for me to let it all out, knowing that I could go back later and remove things or change things depending on what I wanted to fully expose, because it is a memoir. So it is the real, raw, honest story of my life. And it is the very first time that I have ever been that vulnerable. I avoided vulnerability with everything I had for my entire life. I lived a facade and put on this picture perfect, face, but was dying on the inside and had so many secrets in the shadows. So this is huge for me. It was a necessary step in my own healing. I had kind of reached a point where I was stagnant, and I had always said I would write a book, but I never knew exactly what that was going to look like or what it would entail until I just decided one day, January 5th, I was like, today I take action, and I just started writing, and then it just kept going, and it happened very fast. It's actually like quite a large book. I'm surprised with my own self. And like I had it to the editor August 1st. So it was a very fast dump, but I was ready, obviously.
For sure, you were ready. And it's It's crazy, hey, how it just, when it's time, it's almost like the book takes on a life of its own.
Oh, mine is far beyond what I imagined I would allow to be out there exposed for the world to know about me. But then, like I said, being such a therapeutic process for me, now I'm in the space where it's like people can actually know who I really am. I got to know who I really am through the process, and now others will actually get to know the real side of me, the pieces of me that, stayed hidden, that I never ever shared.
And it's so important to share these things. Like it's scary. It's so scary, but so important because when you bare your soul like that, then it gives other people permission to do the same. And like I saw on your website, you have the hardest thing to do is ask for help. Like reading your book could be the way that the door opens for people to actually ask for help or start to allow themselves to be vulnerable too.
Absolutely. And I feel like if this could just impact one person, then it was worth it. Like if I can shed the light on the trail for one person to know that it's possible to come out of the depths of the darkness and thrive and live, it was worth it.
100%. So, Lynette, for the people who are watching who aren't familiar with your story and kind of how you got into doing the work that you do, could you just tell us a bit about your story and where you've come from and where you're going and the work that you do?
Sure. So it started with an 18-year career in the fire service. I was a full-time career firefighter for 14 years. There are very few females on the career side. It's like 6%, I think, in all of Canada. So we're a very small but mighty group. And I did 4 years as an auxiliary prior, which is like a paid on call volunteer. And then I got hired full time into my dream job. And I loved every aspect of firefighting. I loved every minute of it. I loved serving my community, working with others. Like it was an adrenaline pumping, but unfortunately, I had experiences with bullying, discrimination, harassment, and misogyny right from day one. And I was fought every step of the way. And I never had any psychological issues with the job that I did. I had a lot of coping skills in place and tools because I knew that I would need them for the job, because you see and do very abnormal, extreme things that most people don't, they can't even fathom the things that we see and do. But I didn't have any coping skills in place for the abuse and the toxicity that I was surrounded by. And so I spent years keeping secrets to keep others comfortable and literally sacrificed my well-being in the process. And it takes a lot for me to reach my limit, but I eventually reached it last year. 14 years of, or I should say 18 years, because it started right from me even inquiring about becoming a firefighter. I reached my limit and I gave up a career that I absolutely loved to be able to share my story and tell the truth about what really went on. And in order to be able to heal the pieces of myself that I wasn't able to while still being employed and surrounded by those people. So I took an early retirement last fall, and I had already started my business in the shadows and was doing a little bit of teaching, because I teach assisting individuals in crisis and group crisis intervention, which is all peer support based. So I had started that when I was with the fire department. And then I kind of started my own business on the side, doing the teaching part. And then I just kept going with getting certifications and became a traumatologist and a certified trauma responder, and being able to do those things for just the general public, because everybody experiences crisis, everybody has trauma, everybody has high stress. And so being able to teach people coping skills for those things was something I became extremely passionate about. So I started my business in the shadows. And then when I decided to retire, I kind of took a leap forward with it. And with telling my story, opened up a whole new branch of my business in the trauma coaching side, because I've been in the trenches. I've been there and I've done it and I've clawed my way out the other side. So I am very relatable, and I can hear things in people when they're explaining their experiences. I listen for themes and keywords and kind of play it back to them in a sense of hearing what they actually said. And it's powerful. It's extremely powerful. And I am very blessed and honored to be able to support and guide people through some of their darkest, most traumatic experiences and give them tools to come out the other side so that they can thrive. Because we end up in a space like I did where I was merely barely surviving. I wasn't thriving. I wasn't living. I was just surviving. There was times when I was barely functioning, but I faked it till I made it, and most people were none the wiser. And I think when I finally came forward and started speaking the truth about what I had experienced and what I had hid and what I had suppressed, people were shocked. There was also people who were horrified that I was actually speaking the truth about the things that had gone on behind closed doors and believed that those things should stay behind closed doors. Those were my brothers that, were supposed to have my back, and I was supposed to be able to trust them. And so I've made some enemies in the process, and I'm totally okay with that, because I believe when you have haters, it means you're doing really big things.
Totally.
And if they, didn't want the secrets exposed, then maybe they shouldn't have done the things they did and behaved the way that they behaved. So we each have to own our own part. And the big, huge part for me was owning the role that I was playing in my own suffering. I was the one keeping secrets. I was the one pretending and hiding and refusing to be vulnerable. And it was killing me.
And it does slowly just eat away at you. But it's also scary to let those secrets out and to face that part of yourself and the people around you who've been mistreating you. And this is serious big work that you've been doing.
Huge.
And I so love that you're helping people work through their trauma too, because so many people have been through horrendous things and just don't know how to even cope with it and even begin to process any of it.
And I am a true believer that everything that you need to heal is within you. We just don't know how to access it or find it. Our ego and stuff kicks in and misdirects us and tries to keep us small and safe and hidden. And everything that we need is there. And so I have the opportunity to, like I said, I just listen and hold space for people, and then kind of say back their themes that they've just spoken. And they're like, oh my God, I didn't even know that. And I was like, you literally said it yourself. Like, you know this, you already know this. And that was the direction that I was pointed in. And it's so powerful when you realize that it's right there, and it's not as hard or as scary as a person thinks. It's daunting and it's uncomfortable. Oh, it's uncomfortable, but that's where the magic happens.
And you're so right. Like, everything that you need is inside of you, and it's closer to the surface than you even think. But being able to have that conversation with someone and have them reflect it back to you and just hear it from someone else who's outside of your head, it's kind of crazy, because it's like, was it that obvious? Because I wasn't seeing it. How'd you see it so quickly?
Well, and I laugh and I say to my clients, like, we'll have a love-hate relationship. Like, you're going to hate me for the things that I, say back to you, because you know that they're true, but you're going to love me for it. I promise. And if you're mad at me, then I know that I've got in there and I've really helped somebody see the truth of what it is that they've been hiding within themselves or refusing to allow to come to the surface. So I love my job. It's the best.
That's awesome. So by the time this is posted, your book will be live. Yeah. Can you tell us a bit about it and the themes that you cover and kind of how it might help people?
So yes, it launches this Saturday. It's everything in my life. Like I said, it didn't turn out how I expected it to. So it's even my mom, who I gave her a copy to read before anybody else. And right in chapter 1, she stopped and she said, I thought you said this was all about the fire department, and it starts in your childhood. And I said, yeah, my life didn't start when I started firefighting. So I had to get really honest and start going back through the patterns of my life to where did this come from? And as I started doing the work and digging deeper and deeper, that's where it started. So it is literally a story of my life from starting from childhood and the abuse that was happening in my home, the messaging that I received from toxic parenting, abusive parenting, watching my mom go through the abuse that she was enduring. And that led into toxic relationships and allowing men to treat me in certain ways, which led to some very abusive relationships, mentally, emotionally, and physically, which led to a career being surrounded by certain men who were abusive and toxic and mentally, emotionally, and verbally abusive. And through that process and into when I started to heal and do some work on myself, to when I started actually standing up for myself, to when I planted my feet and absolutely refused to endure any other behavior and went toe to toe with quite a few, and how I came out the other side into where I am now. So it's a full, broad spectrum, even becoming a mother while I was in the fire service and the struggles that I went through with that. And, everything was based around the contract. Well, there was no writing in the contract for a female because I was the only one. I was the first ever and only one. And so there was no writing in the contract for a female, which meant there was nothing for maternity leave. So they were, kind of talking about they were talking about trying to get me fired, even just because I got pregnant. I was unable to do my job. So the fights that I had to go through with that and the stress that came along with it, to trying to be a mom and working shift work and packing a pager with an infant, and my pager would go off in the middle of the night, and the struggles we had with childcare because I worked a 4 on 4 off schedule, and those 4 on, you're owned by the department. Like I carried a pager all night and a pager all day when I switched to night shifts. Well, you can't get daycare for that. So we had to have a live-in nanny in order for me to be able to work. So there was just a lot of sacrifice in family dynamic and people having to step in and step up so that I could do my job. Sometimes I would get called out, sometimes I wouldn't, but I had to have everybody on standby just in case. And that's a really hard way to live. Plus my husband worked shift work as well. So, you got 2 members of the family trying to both work 2 completely different shift work schedules and raise a family. And so that's in there, and the struggles that I went through, even as a mom with postpartum depression, and, keeping that a secret, and all of the emotions that I suppressed and the experiences that I never told anyone about. So it's all in there. It's next level vulnerable.
That's a lot to carry alone.
Yeah, it was. I was in so much pain all the time. I'm in great physical shape. Like the gym has always been something extremely important to me, and I've always taken pride in my health. And I was extremely physically fit, and I was in so much pain all the time. An eye twitch that wouldn't go away for months at a time. Excruciating back pain, hip pain, chiropractor, acupuncture, massage, like all of the things, and nothing worked. But nowhere along the way did anybody ever say, like, how much trauma have you endured? How many emotions have you suppressed? What kind of stress are you under? Nothing. So I just pushed through until I couldn't do it anymore. It worked until it didn't. And I just reached a point where enough was enough. And I even say that to my clients, you have to reach the point where enough is enough and you're sick of your own shit, and then change will happen. But if you're not there, it's not going to happen. And so it took me a long time to reach my limit. And when I finally did, there was no turning back.
What was that point for you?
I got screwed over on a promotional position within the department. And I just thought, I'm not doing this anymore. Like it just, that was the icing on the cake. It had been personal for the entire time that I was there. It was all personal. And this one just finally was the last straw.
It's so brutal because you give so much of yourself to the department and your community and just being of service, and to not have the support that you need, and like having people trying to fire you for getting pregnant rather than reworking the rules. It's wild to me. I'm so sorry that you went through all of that.
Thank you. I have such a different perspective on it now. I lived in the misery of it for so long, and all the wrongs and all of the things that happened to me, and, poor me, and how could this happen to me, and all of that kind of a mentality. And now I wouldn't be where I am if it hadn't happened. And I wouldn't be able to make the impact on others if I didn't have the personal experience to back it up.
Percent.
So as horrible as it was, there was a purpose behind it. And I have turned that into my passion. And I get the opportunity now to show others that it's possible. And even when I started telling my story, even just tiny little increments of it, I did a podcast right when I was retiring. And it aired, I think, the day after I left, which caused a massive explosion. But I had so many people message me, complete strangers, saying I experienced the same thing. And the majority of them were men.
Really?
That is the culture. And it's, do as I say, not as I do. It's all paramilitary structure. You respect the rank, even if the behavior is horrific. And so many of them were like, thank you for speaking the truth, because I quit firefighting for that reason. I quit policing for that reason. It was mind-blowing to me how many people felt seen and heard just from me telling tiny bits. And so I hope that my story will allow people to have an even bigger piece of being seen and being heard with the book.
Wow. I'm just so happy that we're having this conversation. And I just want to give you props for stepping out and speaking out in vulnerability. It's brave what you're doing. And I think the more that we have these conversations, the more that things like this can be brought into the light, the more we can actually start to affect change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, there was instances when I first started firefighting, 2 in particular, female firefighters that had been hired in a department south of me, and they had been bullied and harassed so much that one of them actually committed suicide. It was to the extreme. And the other one had started, I don't know all the details, so I might get it a bit wrong, but I believe both of them had started court cases. And then it had gotten so extreme that one of them died by suicide. That had been brought to my attention in the very beginning, saying, well, see what happens when you hire a female. Like, they, take everything personal, and they, cause nothing but grief to the departments. This is why we don't want one.
Unbelievable.
And I made it my mission to not be that girl. And so that was where a lot of the secret keeping and stuff came in the beginning, because I didn't want to be, hated on because I exposed or caused trouble or made waves. So I just kept everything to myself, because I thought, well, maybe if I kill them with kindness, maybe they'll leave me alone. And it didn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way.
But I tried my hardest, because I never wanted them to say, oh, she was such a bitch, or she was so, like, all these things. But so I would make sure that I was always pleasant, and, I would hunt them down to say good morning, and make sure that I went above and beyond in certain aspects. And it never came out in my favor.
You still got bullied anyway.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they always found something. There was always something. And don't get me wrong, it wasn't all of them. There were some exceptional men that I worked with integrity and values and morals, and they were true brothers. Like, they understood what the brotherhood meant. And unfortunately, the bad ones ruin it for everyone. But I don't paint everyone with the same brush, because there was definitely some exceptional guys that I am truly friends with to this day. The sad part to me was that so many saw what was happening and never said anything. Right from the very beginning, they watched certain things be said or done, and they cowered and never said anything. And I know it took me a long time to understand it, but then I realized that they were afraid as well.
For sure.
Because, I had my job threatened at every turn. They tried to get me fired, and they were threatening me constantly. And so I know that it was probably happening on the other side as well. And so that's why they never, ever said anything. And I just feel like if people actually stepped up, power in numbers, and said, this is not happening, this is not okay, we will not accept this kind of behavior and stood up for each other, I think it would be a completely different dynamic.
100%. It's that veil of secrecy and stuff that just, I don't know, it's like toxicity just grows. It's like bacteria. It's like mold. It grows in the secret dark places and it just multiplies and multiplies.
Oh, absolutely. And there was certain individuals, I mean, they had nicknames for certain people because they were so toxic. Like there was guys within the department calling one of their own brothers, nicknamed him Cancer because he was just so toxic. But do you think any of them would ever step up and say that to his face or go toe to toe with him or back me up on the things that he was doing? No, but they called him that behind his back because they knew, but he was allowed because it's union and it's seniority and there was nothing that could be done.
That kind of stuff gets me so riled up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unacceptable. And I experienced it to the extreme.
And it's unfortunate, but it's everywhere. Like it's in schools, it's in workplaces that even aren't traditionally male dominated. It's this, I don't want to say if it's part of the human condition, but it's everywhere.
It is everywhere.
It's everywhere. And I feel like we do have to shine a light on it. Otherwise, it will just keep growing.
Absolutely. And having coping skills and tools in place to be able to work through these experiences with these people changes everything. And if I would have had some of those in place for this, but I was so hyper focused on the job and not having any repercussions from the job. Mm-hmm. And I did well there. Like trauma has a way of sneaking up on you later in life, but I am very fortunate to say that I have not been impacted by my job yet. And I hope not to be. But I was so focused on, not getting PTSD or psychological injuries from my job that I never even took into consideration how injured I was from the other stuff that I had experienced.
It's crazy, hey? And like the psychological injury that comes from emotional, psychological abuse like that, it's so insidious. It's one of those things that kind of, I don't know, it kind of sneaks up on you and just keeps compounding and compounding. And then, I don't know, like this is even just making me think of narcissistic abuse. It's very similar. You're always walking on eggshells, worried about, saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, and the repercussions of it. And then you put on all of these masks and try to keep everybody happy and try to keep the peace. And that sometimes can even make it worse.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it wouldn't have mattered what I did. It wouldn't have been enough. I went to extremes. Like I was an extreme people pleaser as a result. Yeah, you too?
Me too.
Yeah. And it wouldn't have mattered what I did. It still wouldn't have been enough, but I would have killed myself trying to make it enough just to prove to them that I was worthy.
Right.
And all I wanted to do was belong. But I was trying so hard to fit in. And I mean, I'm a woman in a man's world, and I was the only one. And there's only so much fitting in that you can do because you obviously stand out. But I just wanted to belong, and I wanted to have the opportunity to do the job that I loved to the best of my ability. And yeah, so many people ask me, like, why did you stay for so long? If it was that bad, why did you stay for so long? And I feel like that's a question that gets asked in abusive relationships and stuff too. It's like, well, why did you stay? If it was that bad, like, was it really that bad? Like, why did you stay? And I said, the question should actually be, why did they treat me the way that they did?
Right.
Not why did I stay? And I stayed because I believed that I deserved to be there. I worked my ass off to get in there. It took me way more than any of them had ever experienced to be able to get into the department. They were so worried about me getting special treatment all the time. Well, I got plenty of special treatment, but it was not ever in my favor. They made me do things that were like way harder than anybody else. There's a physical exam to start with that you need to be able to be a firefighter. And so they decided that once I got hired that I had to go and do that physical test. This new one that hadn't been mentioned before. So I started doing some research, and it was something like 97% of females don't pass it on their first 2 tries. Like it's brutal. It's hard. And so I went and did it, and I passed it on my first try.
Right on.
They questioned it. How many tries did this actually take you? It's like just 1. And they're like, yeah, right. So then I got hired, and then they decided that my certificate had expired. So they made me go do it again.
What's involved in that?
In the physical?
For the certificate?
Well, they decided that it was only good for a year because the place that I had gone and done it had a 1-year expiry on it, and it had their department name and everything on it. It had nothing to do with my department. It was just the facility that offered the test, and they were even surprised to see me to start with. And then they decided that they were going to implement the 1-year expiry, and so they wanted me to go and do it again. So I had to go do it twice, and so they were really hoping that I wouldn't make it the second time, because then that would be their window of opportunity for me not to complete the process of being hired full time. Like they tried everything. So I went and did it again, and I actually passed it faster than I had the first time. And so I waited until the very last minute because I had to present it to them before my 6-month probation was up.
Okay.
And so I held on to it and just kind of tucked it away. And then they knew my time was up and said, so, are you planning on doing it, or knowing full well that my time was done? And I said, oh, I actually already did. And they were like, what? When? I was like, well, that doesn't matter. Well, why didn't you say anything? I'm like, because I didn't need to. It's none of your business. I went and did it. Here's the certificate. Well, they examined it like it was, a fake ID or something. So I had to do things a lot harder and a lot more than anybody else to get hired. So I believed that I deserved to be there.
No kidding.
So that's why I stuck it out. And I loved it. I loved every aspect of it. Mm-hmm. And being the only female and being able to go to schools and show, young girls that it's possible, girls can be firefighters too, was amazing. That was a huge highlight of my career, was watching, their little eyes light up and seeing me driving a fire truck. And I would get messages from moms and stuff all the time saying, oh, my daughter's seeing you driving the fire truck. And she said, Mom, there's a girl. So she said, just showing, my daughter that she could do it too. And it is the coolest job in the world if you're given the opportunity to do it, freely.
I can imagine. And
I have a lot of friends that are career firefighters, and they have had exceptional experiences. They have been welcomed with open arms. There was advertisements in the news about them being the first female on the department. Like they were really welcomed. Yeah. I was forbidden to speak to the media. They would not allow me to speak to the media. And they tried to contact me multiple times because first ever female hired in the department. It was a big deal, but they kept it a secret. I was not allowed to tell anyone. It was never announced that, Dawson Creek has hired their first female. To me, my way of thinking was that would have boosted the department and made them look really good and gotten them a lot of positive attention, but their egos wouldn't allow them to have that happen for me to be acknowledged that way. So a lot of people, even I was in the career 10 years and running into people, and they were like, we have a female firefighter here? Like, they had no idea that I was even there.
That's so bizarre.
Yeah.
I cannot make sense of that in my head. It just doesn't even, it makes no sense.
And I was like, use me to promote the department. Like, that would be, in my way of thinking, a huge deal, but they refused. And so I have a lot of friends that have been, like I said, acknowledged and welcomed, and they're excited to bring the female dynamic into the department. And there's things that women can do that men can't, and vice versa. And to be able to have both within a department, I think it's amazing. There's a lot of strengths and weaknesses on both sides that you can use for each other. Yeah, wait till you read the book.
I can't wait. I'm so excited.
There's so many stories in there. Yeah, I've had a few people that read it already in the proofreading realm, and they say, oh, I was so mad. And because I wanted people to be able to feel from my perspective what it actually felt like to be in those experiences. And I got some feedback stating like I was irate at what had happened, and then I was crying, and then I was laughing, and then I was so it's all the feels, which is what I was hoping, because that's what it was for me. It was all the feels.
Oh, the whole gamut. And
Yeah.
that's a huge compliment to your writing too, that you can evoke that much emotion in people. Well, you can tell you just wrote from your heart.
Right, it's amazing what a person can come out with. And even after completing the book and then going back through and moving some chapters and doing some reading and rereading and rereading, it's like, I surprised my own self, because I was like, wow, that came out of me. And it just, I allowed it to just flow. And when you get honest with yourself, like really honest, it's amazing what transpires.
No kidding.
Yeah. I had to apologize to myself for all the lies that I told myself for so long. So much shame and guilt and stuff came with that, and so much mistrust that I had built within myself and self-doubt from lying to myself for so long. And, again, that's why I say owning the role that I was playing in my own suffering, because I did that to me. Nobody did that part. I did that in survival. And I understand that. And I had to accept that and acknowledge myself for it and thank myself for it. All those past versions of me that barely survived got me to where I am right now, to have the bravery to be able to speak up and say, this is what is actually the truth.
Oh, I just got chills.
If you had told me 5 years ago that I would be doing that, I would be like, yeah, that's not happening.
Right.
These secrets will go to my grave, is what I had truly believed would be the case. But yeah,
I hear you.
and I think that's the part that we need to accept the most, is how many lies are we telling ourselves.
Oh man.
And mine was to keep secrets for others, to just prove that I was worthy, seeking external validation at every turn in my life.
Yeah, that resonates really deeply, because that was my whole thing too. And it was so crazy to realize, like, it was like I had built an entire world out of lies and secret keeping for people. And when you start to break that off of yourself, it's just like, holy crap. And I didn't even realize how much of that coping mechanism became like my personality. So then it was like relearning who I actually am outside of people pleasing and trying to get that validation and trying to keep everybody comfortable. It's scary to start having boundaries and standing up for yourself and holding your ground in front of the people that you were keeping secrets for when you decide not to anymore.
I feel all of that. Yeah, absolutely. And then it's a huge eye opener in realizing who benefited from you not having any boundaries. And that's the only reason why they were in your life. And when I started removing and not allowing that toxicity anymore, I was worried at first. It's like, well, I had a small circle. Now I have a really small circle. Like, I'm not going to have any friends if this is where this is going. But it actually was the opposite effect. And it opened the door to so many people that are like-minded and on similar paths and are authentic, and empowered me beyond extreme, and supportive and non-judgmental. And it's been incredible. Social media has been huge too, like meeting people like you, who I never would have connected with had I not started speaking up and opening up about my journey, and starting my Instagram page, and watching you write a book, and then reaching out to you because I was writing a book, and saying, hey, I know you don't know me, but will you please tell me all your secrets? And just connecting with people that are, doing the work. I never would have been connected otherwise. Like, had I been stuck in my shadows and still people pleasing and doing all of that, like, you just keep circling with toxic. You just keep bringing in more and more. Setting boundaries it's the hardest piece. That's the part that most people struggle with, is setting healthy boundaries
and sticking to them.
Yeah. They're for protection, not punishment. And I think a lot of people refer to them as punishment, but that's because they were benefiting from you not having any. So they look at it as punishment.
Yeah, and it's crazy when you do realize how many people were benefiting off of you having no boundaries. Like it's quite heartbreaking. I went through like months of people just falling out of my life once I started having boundaries, and I was like, "Really? You?" Like ones that I thought would stick around didn't, and I'm just like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah. And I had to like understand too that people are in your life for a season or a reason, and it's okay to leave them behind. Doesn't mean you don't love them, but if they're not willing to grow alongside you or do work to better themselves, it's okay to leave them behind. And I was given a powerful phrase from a friend of mine, and it was, I love you, but I love me more. And that really got me through a lot of those kind of spaces where I had to leave people behind. And it was, I still love you, but I love me more. And I hadn't put myself first in so long. And even as a mom, like you're taught that you don't come first, like your kids come first, and everybody else comes first, and you get the leftover scraps of supper or whatever. But in understanding that in order to be the best mom, the best sister, the best wife, the best firefighter, to be the best version of myself, I had to put myself first, and then everybody benefits from it. And so leaving people behind was a really powerful piece for me in understanding that it was okay, and I could still love them. Some of them completely disappeared because they couldn't handle it, and that wasn't for me to own. And then in walked other people to replace them, and it was like, oh, look at this breath of fresh air that just walked into my life, that is stable and clear and focused and healed. And yeah, wow.
It's such a 180. Because the same thing happened for me. Social media has been so amazing in that way. I'm just same thing, meeting all of these amazing people who are doing the work and helping others. And like you say, they're clear and focused, clear communicators
Mm.
and supportive. I was amazed how many internet strangers who I've never met in person were supporting what I did and just being really beautiful friends.
Yeah, absolutely. I've experienced the same thing, like from complete strangers to important people in my life now. I've never met them in person. Like, yeah, it's amazing when you allow yourself. I forced everything. Like I will prove to you. I will make it happen. If you tell me that I can't, I will prove to you that I can. Like I forced everything, and it was exhausting. And when I allowed things now to just flow and align, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. It's like, okay, well, I'm being redirected for some reason. Whereas I would make it happen in the direction that I thought that it should happen. And it was never satisfying. It was never the result that I thought that I was going to get. And it was, I keep saying exhausting, but that's what it was.
It's exhausting.
But now just allowing things to just flow as they should. And my son even says that to me, Mom, you used to be so serious. And now I'm just like, oh, whatever. It didn't happen. It didn't happen. That's okay. And I felt that way when I walked out the door from my career. I was like, oh, okay, let's see what's next. And I thought I would be crushed, and I haven't looked back. I feel like it was the best gift I gave myself.
It's awesome. Yeah, and you don't realize how much energy it takes to kind of try to force things to be a certain way until you let go and allow yourself to flow and align. And it's like, oh, okay, this life could be like this.
I don't have the pain in my body that I had before.
Right?
Yeah. As soon as I started doing like some deep work healing, with hypnotherapy was the one that worked magic for me. I was like, that back pain is gone. My eye twitch was gone. Like I am not living in excruciating pain anymore. Like once I started unpacking all of the suppressed emotions and suppressed trauma and allowed that to come out, and now I just allow things to flow. I don't carry any of that stuff. That's especially if it's not mine. I am not carrying anything that is not mine. I'm not owning anybody else's actions ever again. And it's like I just put it up and I'm like, no, you can have that back and you can have that back. And it's freeing. Like I feel so light and free.
I love that. I kind of do a check-in at the end of the day and just see kind of how I'm feeling. And same thing, if I've taken on anything, I'm like, okay, I'll just put that on the shelf or just give that back. And yeah, same thing, because I used to have migraines and just like neck pain, shoulder blade pain, sciatica, like all the stuff in my back. And now I don't really. And if I notice those things creeping back up, I'm like, okay, where am I people pleasing? Am I taking on too much?
What role am I playing in this? Because this is mine.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then you make some adjustments and then the body settles down. I'm like, okay, all right, we're back. We're back in alignment.
Yeah.
And that was such a huge shift for me to realize is how much our bodies actually talk to us and how much it'll tell you when you're out of alignment. It'll tell you when you're going against your own intuition or giving too much or everything like that. If you learn how your body communicates, you can kind of really keep yourself on track.
Oh, absolutely. Even when certain individuals enter a room, notice your body. All of a sudden, your jaw is clenched, or I was always clenching my fists. Like that's what was the telltale sign for me. Is all of a sudden I'm like, oh, my fists are clenched, and then I'd look around and it's like, oh, that's why, because it's like your body know, and that energy, like that toxic energy, you can just feel it when you start paying attention. Yeah, your body keeps the score. I love that saying. And it will hold on to all of the things that you suppress until it doesn't want to hold on to it anymore. And I would have anger outbursts. Like anger was my go-to. And it was all, of course, based out of loss of control and fear. But I was angry all the time, explosive angry. And it was because all of those things that I had suppressed would just show up at the most inopportune time in the wrong form. And I would, instead of just being a little bit frustrated about something, like I would literally, like I picked up my son's bike and threw it across the yard. Like it was explosive, or punch a hole in the wall. And it had nothing to do with anything that was happening in that moment. It was probably something from 3 years ago that I had suppressed and pushed down, and it just decided to surface. That's what emotions do. Guaranteed, they will show up at some point in your life, either in the wrong form or in the form of dis-ease and people, unexplained illnesses and pain. And that's what it is. And when you start unpacking all of that stuff, it's amazing how it feels. Because I was the queen of, oh, I'll take that for you. Oh, I'll hold that for you. Oh, here, let me carry that for you. I'll own that for you. And I just put it all in my backpack and hang on to it.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll people please a little bit more, and sure, I'll take that too. Yeah, why not?
Yeah. Then we wonder why our back hurts.
Oh, right. Yeah, and then you start unpacking all of that, and it's like, oh, that's not mine. Well, that's not mine either. Like it's amazing. People think it's, they don't want to go back into the past, and they don't want to relive the experiences, so they don't want to get into the healing part of it because they're scared of how bad it hurt the first time, so they don't want to dive into that stuff. But that's not what it is. You need to sit with it, process it, but you can't relive it. It's already happened. It's not happening again. So it's not as excruciating as people are worried that it is. And so often when we start unpacking that stuff, 3, 4, 5 things come with it at the same time. And it's like, okay, now I just unloaded all of that. And sometimes it's one great big thing. And it's like, okay, let's work through that. And then the next time it's 10 small things, just gone.
Yeah, I was actually talking to a friend about that the other day because I had something come up in my life that had kind of the same emotion and the same trigger as things that had happened before that I hadn't quite processed. I let myself feel it, and it was suddenly like all of these memories came up and just vanished. It was almost like just pulling the thread out.
Yeah.
And then it was gone. It's kind of a cool process. So yeah, it doesn't have to be devastating. We just kind of have to make room for the feelings.
Yeah, we just want to remove the emotional attachment to it so that it doesn't keep eating away at us.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's as simple as that, like just pulling the thread, and it's like, oh, poof, there it goes. Okay. And then you don't have, when it surfaces again, it's like, no, I feel nothing now. There's no emotional attachment there anymore.
Right?
Yeah.
Pretty amazing when you think about it. like you say, we have everything that we need inside of us and we know what to do. Just kind of allowing yourself to go there and do that work.
And it's fear and, survival and safety, and try to keep ourselves safe. And if we don't talk about it or we don't, unpack it, then we'll stay safe. And I mean, long ago, the generations, even my mom, right? If we sweep it under the rug, just put it there safely, tucked away, never to be seen or heard from again. Yeah, right. but that's how they, and she will always be that way.
For sure. Even though that lump under the rug is now a foot tall and everybody can see it.
Mhm.
And yeah. But I feel like the generations who came before us, there was no room for this kind of work. Everyone was just surviving, doing what they needed to get by to the next day.
Yeah, there was no conversations. And it was always, I did the best I could with what I had.
Yeah.
And I believe that because they weren't given any tools or anything at all. And now there's so much open dialogue about it, and conversations, thank goodness, are happening, and people are speaking and telling the truth about childhoods, because that's, I mean, if we're honest, that's the majority of where it starts, and changing the trajectory of it and saying it stops here. And I have a son, and all of my experiences have to do with men in authority positions and, male figures in my life. And I want my son to know how to properly treat women and to never, ever allow that in our family dynamic again. Like, it stops here.
It's such important work. It really is.
And it's hard because he wants to know what's in the book, right? He's 11, just about 12. And there's people that he cares about and loves and knows. And I'm like, it's someday.
Yeah.
When 18 and can understand things better, but not right now. It's not for him. It's not for his level of understanding or acknowledging or anything. So someday he'll be able to. And there's a special piece in the book just for him from when I was at my worst, in hopes that he will understand why I was the way I was.
I think he'll understand.
I think he will too, when he's ready.
Mm-hmm.
He's way too young for that now, but when he's ready, someday it's there for him.
And he'll be able to see how far you've come, how much work you've put in, and the way that you're living with intention now, and the way that you have healed and continue to heal is such a gift, actually, that you can give your kids.
Well, and it's terrifying because I listen to so many podcasts and stuff, and they talk about being in the womb, like, and how our behaviors and all of those things while our children are in the womb, and how they take on those things. I think about the experiences that I was having. I'd only been in the department for 2 years when all of that happened.
Right.
And so I, was in the depths of it, and how that has affected him. And so trying to process through things like that too, as a mom, and not be overcome with guilt and worry and shame, and think, okay, well, I probably did that before he was even born. And, what kind of corrective experiences do we need to have around this now? Because I'm responsible for that. But I think a lot of it just in understanding it and educating myself and being able to process through it as well. I do things a lot differently with him now, that's for sure. Conversations and stuff that we have in trying to help him and boost him and support him in ways that I never could before.
And that's massive. And that's what will make the change, honestly.
Yeah, even for him to say, how calm I am now, because I used to be so serious and I used to get so mad all the time. So it's working. I know what I'm doing is working. He can see it. So, and I feel it. I know it's working. But through the eyes of a child and their level of honesty that they bring forward too is humbling.
I bet. The fact that you're here for it and continuing to show up and be vulnerable and honest and committed to the work, that's all you can do.
Totally.
All you can do.
Yeah.
Ooh, felt that in my heart.
Yeah. Cheers.
Thank you so much for sharing your story.
You're so
Part
welcome.
of it.
Yeah, thank you for having me, giving me the opportunity and the safe space to do that.
So happy to. I'm so excited to read your book. I cannot wait. I'm waiting until I can get the paperback copy because I like to have a hard copy. This was a really important conversation to have, Lynette. I'm so grateful for your openness and willingness to share. And I know that people in my audience will be too. So, could you let them know where they can get a hold of you and get in touch if this story resonated with them?
I'm easy to find. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. My business name, Fire Within Crisis Services. They can find my website, firewithincrisisservices.com. And it's just me. So if you message me and it's just me answering you back, I have no team or no help or anything like that. So it's true, genuine, authentic conversation. Show up in my DMs. I love it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for
Thank
this.
you.